listening to myself as I'm setting this up, having difficulty with the audio. And I'm going to go with the camera right. I am not going to lie, I was pretty fired up about an hour ago. And I was doing some stuff. And that's usually, I'm getting to the place in my life where I can hopefully get up in the morning and do a little podcast every morning. But for now, I do it when I feel inspired. I do it when I have the space. I'm a 44-year-old man going through a 3-year divorce. And I'm not whining or complaining or playing the victim. I'm just stating a fact. And I have 2 little girls that I love completely. And I wrap my life around them. And that's not bullshit. That's not just making something up. I wrap my life around them. And meaning I try to put them first. And they have been through too much. So I try to be a rock for them. And so I don't always do this podcast on cue or consistently, but that is something I definitely am working toward. And as I'm talking and killing time here, I'm just checking my settings. And we'll do some nice breaths while I'm checking my settings. I always find coming back to my breath is a way to focus my attention on this present moment, to notice that this thing we call the mind can get lost in many, many different places, and it can become tethered to many different things, and pretty soon you have so many tabs open on your page, your home page, that you're overwhelmed. And your emotional brain is listening to all those tabs that are open, to all those thoughts that are open, to all of those obsessions and hypotheticals and future stories and things that we're worried about. And your emotional brain, your limbic system is saying, what the fuck? There's incoming all over the place. I'm overwhelmed. There's too much. And it turns on the anxiety. It turns on the adrenaline. It turns on the cortisol. Turns on the epinephrine, the norepinephrine. It turns on the body, and it's like, we don't know what's wrong, but something must be wrong, because we are contemplating a lot, and we are thinking a lot, and we are thinking about the future a lot, and we are obsessing over ideas and beliefs and fears a lot. So something must be wrong. So I find coming back to the basics of the moment, noticing the sensation without a story, noticing the sensation without a label even, noticing the sensation, observing it, accepting it, opening my belly, feeling what my body feels, even if it's really intense, and sitting with the breath, working on the breath, noticing the sensation, noticing what it's telling me, saying thank you for your wisdom, noticing my emotions are not me per se. They are an expression. They are a source of wisdom, a source of data. Emotions are your body's way of automatically telling you how you perceive the present moment based on attachment, memory, learning, how you have selectively attended to your life over time. Now I got to take a pause because I am obsessing over my settings because I haven't done this for a little while, and I was very spontaneous and I was cleaning up earlier and I was moving my cords around, so I want to make sure I don't screw this up right now. So here's what I was chewing on earlier. By the way, my name is Dr. Mark Jesinoski. I'm a clinical psychologist. This is called the Wizard Podcast because infantry Marines in particular tend to call psychologists wizards. I got to go see the wizard, they say. And they chuckle and they make fun of it, and it's a good old time. And so I've gotten to walk next to a lot of veterans, and combat veterans in particular, in their journey. And something I was chewing on earlier was the concept of anger and how I work on it and deal with it as an individual, and how I recognize and I notice how quickly people will judge expression of anger, even if it's a healthy, natural, honest expression of anger in the context of valid injury, valid attack, valid assault. A natural expression of anger is quickly judged in our society. It's quickly labeled and judged and pushed away and invalidated. It's a great way to undermine a society, to invalidate the natural expression of their emotion. So I was thinking about a lot of my friends, and I was thinking about angry Marines walking around their hometowns all over this country, and how so many of them that I've spoken to, so many of them experience, rather than the tribe, rather than the community, rather than the village, having the wisdom to say, oh, your anger is an expression of injury. You're hurting. I'm not afraid of your anger. I'm not going to judge your anger. I'm not going to demonize your anger. I'm not going to label you as a toxic individual. I'm going to say, oh, you're hurting. And the village is going to organize itself around you. And the elders of that village are going to organize themselves around you and say, hey, we see your pain. We acknowledge your pain. You are not alone in your pain. Allow us to support you and guide you and teach you based on what we have learned. And I was noticing my own expression of anger and how many people that I know personally, in the context of my experience over the past 3 years, have passive-aggressively, sometimes directly, insinuated that my expression of anger is simply something wrong or a problem in and of itself, rather than saying, oh, you're a trustworthy guy. You're a guy that works on yourself. You're a guy that practices being honest. In fact, I've never known you to be dishonest. So I'm going to trust that your expression of anger is a natural expression of a place of injury within yourself. I'm going to recognize it. I'm going to acknowledge it. Maybe I'll set boundaries with it. But I'm going to let you know that that anger is okay, because I see where it comes from, and I want you to know I'm here. And indeed, we all need to take responsibility and all do our own work. So, you know, a big part of my journey over the past 3 years has been recognizing what anger is for me, what it means to me, where it comes from, recognizing the history of it, recognizing the difference between healthy masculinity, whether you're a man or a woman, and toxic masculinity, broken, injured masculinity. And recognizing that my own personal experience of experiencing behaviors that are almost totally dismissed by the village around me. Behaviors that are, and I'm being trying to be very thoughtful about how I'm speaking about this, because I'm not getting into detail. I'm not talking about content. I'm talking about process here. That's some wizard talk for you. But experiencing things that in the tribal sense, would have been considered just outside of the tribal code, outside of the value system, outside of an ethical system. And there would be a natural system in a healthy family, a healthy village, a healthy tribe, to ameliorate and correct and address behaviors that are hurtful or harmful. Basically, behavior that is not in the best interest of the tribe. What I was noticing, and I'm definitely trying to tie together a whole bunch of different stuff here as it comes out of my mind, so I'm going to wander. But noticing that my experience is that my experience and the emotional expression that comes with it is relatively meaningless to most people. It's definitely meaningless to the judicial system, but it's also meaningless to the village of people around me in some ways. I'm not invalidating close relationships I have or good family relationships that I have. I'm simply talking about the fact that for some very specific reasons, honest emotional expression has been turned into something of pathology, has been turned into something of politicization. Don't try to pick up big, heavy words like that if they're not going to come out right. Natural emotional expression, natural freedoms, natural individual freedoms have been wrapped in language that allows it to be invalidated and demonized and pathologized and allows it to be used against us for various reasons. And there's many ways we could go down that pathway. But one way I was noticing is how the political left tends to pride itself on its awareness of diversity, its value of diversity, and diversity becomes this idea wrapped in language and rules and expectations and politics and power. And the moment something like that becomes wrapped in politics and power, it loses value, it loses honesty, it loses the natural expression of things. And what I mean by that is we constantly judge and pathologize and demonize people for expressing honest anger. We call them angry somethings. And it's a good way of invalidating people's natural, honest tendency to recognize that something is wrong. What is anger? Anger comes from a place of injury and or from a place of violated agreements. Fundamentally, agreements. We have agreed to a certain set of rules. We've agreed to a certain set of principles. We've agreed to a certain set of values as a village. And these agreements should carry weight in the village, in the tribe. These agreements are things that if we agree upon them, if our behavior is guided by them, presumably this thing works really, really, really well. Problem is, we live in a world now where So many of our agreements have been profoundly ruptured and invalidated, and we have changed ethics. Ethics are like a neutral principle that adapt to agreements. And our ethics have become, it's okay to lie as long as you're getting something from it, as long as you're, moving your team ahead, as long as you're getting what you want. It's okay to lie and manipulate. And I'm not naive. I know these things have always been used throughout history. I love it when there's someone like, yeah, but I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm simply saying that it's become commodified and promoted and behaved and acted out at a magnitude that is beyond words. It's profound, it's astounding, it's insane. That we have normalized the behavior of manipulation and lying. And it's always like, what about, and yeah, but. You can never just look at someone and say, hey, lying used to be wrong. Just simple lying, no matter what team you're on, used to be wrong. It used to be not okay to lie to and manipulate and undermine and cheat and steal. All of the thou shalt nots don't seem to matter anymore. And if you get angry for it, if you act out individually or collectively, what happens? Oh, these are all bad people. These are all toxic people. These are all... And the thing is, I could literally sit on the political spectrum of the right and look left and make this argument. You can sit on the political spectrum of the left and look right and make this argument, because everyone's doing it. That's why people are so easily divided and separated and manipulated. We've forgotten, we've been completely misguided, in my humble opinion, by saying natural sensations in the body that are a response to a complex system of ideas and principles and ethics and rules that we've learned over the course of our lives. We've all gone into certain spoken and unspoken agreements with each other, and we have a national agreement that's called the Constitution. But what I realize, what I'm learning, what I'm experiencing is when you undermine every agreement, when you undermine every ethic, every value, every promise, and then you blame people for getting angry, you blame people for feeling hurt, you call their injury and hurt depression, you call it anxiety, you call it something so that it can be pathologized and minimized and invalidated. You're a toxic whatever, instead of, oh shit, you are hurting. You're acting out behavior, that's you hurting. You don't have the words. You feel powerless. You don't feel like anyone's going to hear you. So you're acting out your rage. You're acting out your powerlessness. You're acting out your injury. You're acting out the fact that you feel, you see with your own eyes and your own ears, and you feel it in your body, that rules and agreements are being undermined and invalidated and broken. You've seen it now in the past year. You've seen it on the political left. You've seen it on the political right. What do? This power machine, this media machine, this media organism, this system of power with a whole bunch of people that it manipulates in order to stay in power, it looks at the other side and says, look at those Black Lives Matter protesters. How dare they? How dare they? Who are they? They must all be wrong, bad, criminal, misguided, something of the other. We should know better by now. History shows us. You just demonize the other. You dehumanize the other. You divide and conquer. You manipulate information. You invalidate and undermine natural rights, natural emotions, natural agreements. And you look at the other side of the political spectrum, and you have people that are genuinely angry, genuinely hurt. And what do? You look at them, you're all a cult, you're all wrong, you must all be stupid, you must all be crazy. And certainly on both political spectrums, you can say these outliers, the ones that are acting out the worst at times, are buying into profoundly misguided ideas and misinformation. That's the point. Being manipulated and used in order to achieve a certain outcome. But what happens when what I practice in my work and what I practice in my life, what happens when you look at someone, and I've experienced this so many times. I work with people in all varieties of the political spectrum. I live and exist in all varieties of the political spectrum. I don't even look at it that way. You look at someone and say, oh, you're hurting, you're injured, you feel used and abused by the society around you. You feel used and abused by the patriarchal power structure around you that says it's got your back, but it definitely doesn't. Veterans come home from war and they're like, I feel used and abused often. I don't mean to speak for all veterans. That's not fair. I'm just saying based on my experience. It's like the divine father figure, the divine, and hear me out on this. I believe Carlos Marlantes wrote about this. This idea that the system of power, the government, is sending men and women off to war under this guise of freedom, which in certain circumstances, World War II is a good example. It certainly was. But veterans come back from Vietnam and they feel totally forgotten by their fathers. They feel totally forgotten by their elders. They feel totally used and abused. It's still going on today. Vietnam veterans have never been served properly. They've never been supported properly. Of course, it happens in pockets. Of course, there are improvements. But I know plenty of Vietnam veterans, and I talk to them. So getting back to the ground of anger, there is a healthy expression of anger. You can't just look at people, and this is a criticism of the political left, because I know a lot of people personally that are like this. Immediately judging someone and demonizing them and pathologizing them and completely invalidating their voice and their story, which is the opposite of your political rhetoric and what is preached, completely invalidating their story because they don't have the language to express what they feel. And nothing they say matters because language has been so manipulated and so undermined and so used and abused that no possible expression or combination of words can get people to understand that I'm fucking hurting. Please help me. People all over are saying, please give a shit. Care. Don't just use and abuse us. We're not just a commodity. We're not just a cog in your wheel. We're not just a thing to be used. I think it's a profound injury to ignore and invalidate the natural expression of anger or the natural expression of sadness, the natural expression of emotion that is saying, please, someone give a shit about how I feel. And I see that across the spectrum. I see it across the political spectrum across the socioeconomic spectrum, across the ethnic spectrum. And what is the fundamental thing that I'm talking about? There's probably 2 points that come out of this that are in my mind right now. Number one, I've learned that expressing myself from a place of hurt or injury or sadness or fear, or even rules have been violated, and I've learned this in my own personal experience. I've learned that expressing myself emotionally assumes that I'm in a village or a tribe or a family of people that actually gives a shit about my emotional expression. That emotional expression developed and exists in the context of a tribal, social, village setting. And if we were living in a world of wisdom, in a world where the elders nurtured and guided and educated the youngsters, and there's a coherent flow from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, rather than all of that having been stripped away and invalidated and undermined by powerful entities throughout history that wish to divide and conquer and profit and power, and learned that by undermining and manipulating people's cultural agreements and cultural norms and the things that keep people working in the village context, by undermining and stripping those things away, we've become incredibly manipulable. And I know I deviated from what I was saying. What I've learned in my own space, I think a lot about the samurai, and I'm not making that up. I think a lot about this idea of the samurai and the idea of how can I be, on one hand, very clear and concise in what I stand for, what I know, the rules that guide me, the values that guide me, the ethics that guide me. How can I take full responsibility for my thoughts, for my emotions, for my behaviors, for my expression? How can I recognize that I can feel my anger in my body as a source of wisdom, as a source of immediate, in the moment information based on a lifetime of experience, based on a lot of practice, based on a lot of learning? How can I look at that sensation in the body rather than acting it out, rather than expressing it in the environment which won't receive it properly, in the environment which will punish it? Learning to observe and perceive and notice the sensation of anger in the body without allowing it to become an acted out thing that may be used or judged or manipulated. I've learned that the hard way. If you're in the context, whether individual, family, cult, community, culture, if you're in a context where your emotional expression, rather than your emotional expression, will be something that is seen, heard, understood, read properly, it is punished and demonized and pathologized. If you're in that kind of environment, it behooves you, if you want to survive and thrive and grow, it behooves you to learn to get in touch with your breath, to notice the sensations of the body without necessarily acting them out. Learning how to use those sensations as a source of wisdom. learning how to sit and stand firm and act from a place of healthy masculinity, whether you're a man or a woman, a place of healthy masculinity where you take ownership over your boundaries, ownership over what you stand for, ownership over your language, ownership over your emotional expression. And you balance that with healthy feminine energy, which is balancing it with love, balancing it with compassion, with nurturing. Could you imagine if our police officers, for example, were trained to emotionally read people, to notice people's emotional expression as a form of language, which it is, to observe someone's emotions and behavior, and to understand, rather than reacting to and acting out and punishing and pathologizing, looking at it and saying, hey, okay, I see you. You're injured. You're hurt. I'm an elder in the community. I receive you. I'm here for you. Let's sit here for a second. Let's slow down. Let's not escalate this thing. Let's slow this down. And I only picked police officers because they're out there in the community. There's clearly a toxic relationship between a lot of people and the police. And it's become this oppositional thing. Thin blue line. Rather than recognizing that creating that line just creates separation and opposition. Does the opposite. Anyway, let's not deviate too far. I know I wandered a bit, but what I'm chewing on is how do you learn to survive and thrive in your own individual environment, your own individual life? And how does that naturally, by extension, by you taking full responsibility for your own space, for your own life, for your own breath, your own thoughts, your own behaviors, your own emotions, your own daily practice, what are you serving? What are you consuming? What are you buying into? What stories are you forwarding? What are you clicking on? What are you yelling at? What are you emotionally pulsing with? By taking full and honest responsibility for those things, by learning to listen to our own emotions rather than saying, I'm depressed, I must be sick, I need to make this go away, rather than I'm angry and I can't share this because my community won't receive it. Just saying, okay, I notice I feel sad. I notice I feel lethargic. I notice I feel tired. I notice I feel powerless. And I notice I want to curl in a ball and crawl in the cave. Rather than, there must be something wrong with me, how about my body is an honesty machine that's telling me something is horribly wrong with my environment, or horribly wrong with how I perceive myself in the context of my environment. I'm going to use these sensations as a source of wisdom to inform me about how I perceive this present moment and the world around me. And I'm going to use that to guide my behaviors in the direction of what I love, what I value, what I care for. I'm going to allow my behavior to be guided by chosen values and love, as opposed to automatic reaction from a place of fear or a place of injury or a place of being manipulated by some power structure out there who just wants to use and abuse you for their own ends. And I started this thought tonight by thinking about so many combat veterans I've worked with, some of whom are very close friends, who have to be so careful with their emotional expression, have to be so careful with how they behave when they come home. I've worked with so many young men whose benefits were taken away from them because they were coping with trauma in a way that wasn't acceptable to their government. Rather than saying, oh, you're hurting. Oh, you're seeking out medicine. You're hurting. Let's receive you. Let's help you. Hey, this, parent figure of a government, how about instead of demonizing and judging and harming these individuals in the society, how about, oh, you're hurting. Let me validate that. Let me love that. Let me tell you you matter. Let me show you that you're a valued part of the here and now. People are feeling the opposite out there right now. Everyone feels it. I see it in my clients. I see it on the news. I see it in how people are expressing themselves. People's bodies are telling them something is wrong with this picture. And we all have our way of telling it, and we point the finger, and all we do is inflame and perpetuate the division and the separation and the pathologizing, rather than saying, oh, my body is full of wisdom, and my body is telling me something is dreadfully wrong, and my neighbors' bodies are telling them that, and my children's bodies are telling them that, and everyone is full of wisdom, and our wisdom is telling us something is wrong. How do we use the sensations that we call emotions and that we call thoughts? How do we use the sensations of our body in the present moment to guide us toward love, strength, wisdom? How do you do that as an individual? How does that manifest collectively? How does that change families and communities and countries? From the bottom up, from the inside out. You will never, ever change something for good by pointing the finger at someone else. You will never change something for good by lobbing blame at the other, because if you are doing so, you clearly haven't learned the lesson within. No person that has learned that lesson within, no person that has sat there with their breath and learned to take full responsibility from the inside out would reactively and reflexively lob blame at the other. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It never has. It just separates and divides and hurts. If you do that with children in your own family, you're going to create separation and reaction and pain. If you do that with people in your community, same thing. People in your society, same thing. When my daughters are feeling sadness, anger, when they're acting out, I look at them and say, hey, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. There's nothing wrong with feeling what you're feeling. You know what happens? Almost inevitably, their anger turns into tears. Their anger turns into tenderness. Their sadness turns into allowing grief to come out, honest emotional expression. And I don't need to do anything. I don't need to punish them. I don't need to pathologize them. I don't need to tell them they're bad for expressing their emotions naturally. When they're angry, I say, it's okay to feel that. It's okay to listen to your body. What is your body telling you? When they're sad, I say, it's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel tears. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to tell a big story about this. We don't have to make a big deal about it. We can just feel it honestly in the moment and allow it to be what it is, and allow it to teach us and guide us and help us learn about how we're perceiving the landscape of the present moment. When we do that with our children, when we do that with our spouses, when we do that with our communities, when we do that with our friends, when we do that in the workplace, when we do that across the political spectrum, we grow and we change and we become something new from the inside out, from the bottom up. And all these things that we're fretting about and fighting about and fearing about and projecting about, all these things naturally figure themselves out as a natural expression of the individual taking full responsibility from the inside out. And the healed adult, the broken adult child becomes a healed adult, and they express that healing to their children and to their families and their communities. That sounds wonderful to me. And thank you for wandering with me. I don't know if I tied everything together the way I wanted to. I just sat down with a feeling and a thought and an expression and a place that I was in my own life, and recognizing how I've had to learn to take full responsibility for my emotional expression. And I've had to learn to read my emotions and to learn to read the story of my life and how I'm telling it, and to recognize that by progressively taking full responsibility in my life, by healing myself, by working on healing, by taking responsibility for healing, I can naturally be present and acknowledge and show love to people around me. I don't heal anyone. I don't rescue anyone. I don't necessarily tell anyone what to do. I just say, hey, I see you. I see your anger. I see your anger, and I see it for what it is, because I have been on a journey and I recognize what my anger means. So rather than being afraid of you, rather than judging you and hurting you and throwing pills at you and quarantining you behind a guise of medicine, I'm going to say, hey, I see your injury. I see your pain. I love you. Let's sit down and chill together. I'm okay with you. And you know what? When you give someone that kind of love and that kind of permission and that kind of validation, you don't need to do anything else, because they will naturally heal themselves. We are made to naturally grow. We are made to naturally heal. We are made to naturally become like a flower in a garden that is properly sown and properly nurtured. It will naturally grow with the right balance of water and sunlight and love. Same is true for people. Same is true for animals. Same is true for families and communities and cultures and countries. That's all I got in me right now. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this. Take a moment to slow down. Take a moment to notice the sensation of your breath. Notice where the attention of your mind is in this moment. Notice your thoughts instead of thinking your thoughts. Notice the stories you're telling yourself. Notice the sensations of the body without necessarily telling a big story about it. See if you can come back to your breath in this moment and notice. Find something beautiful around you, even if it's difficult. Find something to be grateful for around you in this moment. Notice the blue sky. Notice the green trees. Notice your hands on the steering wheel. Notice the heartbeat in your chest. Notice you get to be. You get to be. People always say, why? Why? What's the purpose? What's the point? Constantly evaluating, looking for reasons. You get to be. We forget the fact that we get to be, we get to exist, we get to do this thing, we get to feel pain, we get to feel love, we get to feel hurt, we get to come into being, we get to become is a profound gift. It's a profound gift to be. Much, much, much love to all of you. This is Dr. Mark Jesinoski. This is the Wizard Podcast, episode 42. I think it's something like March 26th. We'll go with that. Have a wonderful day.